Hello and welcome, and we're back for a special World Cup edition of the FCMP. We got a special guest alongside with us. She is not only an analyst for the NWSL, not only an analyst for the MLS on Apple, she is a former USA national teamer and also a coach for TST, formerly of the UNC Tar Heels, Kacey White.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, Casey, and we've gotten a chance to know each other the last several weeks in the down in the studios in South Florida. So of course, you have a lot of the background with USA Soccer, and you're still very much involved in it. And we're recording this on Saturday morning, so two games have already gone through in this group stage so far. But based on what you've seen of the US and how well they've performed, especially the two different ways that they won those two games, there's a lot of hype on this USA train.
Mhm.
Should people hop on board?
I do think people should hop on board, but I do also have a lot of thoughts from the tactical perspective of how this tournament can go. I don't think it hurts us, though, to have fandom, to have people hopping on board and supporting the men's national team. This is the first time since 1930 that they've won the first two group games. People can say, okay, it might be for this reason or that reason. The reality is, winning at the highest level is incredibly difficult. We're seeing it with countries like Spain getting a tie against Cape Verde. Like, there are so many results that are very difficult. So for the US to come in and be able to get wins against Paraguay and Australia is a great start. So why not get in there and support them?
So we actually talked about this off camera a little bit right before we started recording, but you mentioned some of the X's and O's and some of the very specific kind of tactical stuff that has allowed the US to have this early success in the World Cup. Even though, obviously you have more insight than the normal person would have, but maybe break it down for someone, especially in this time of the year, like this time of the World Cup. There's a lot of new fans, a lot of people getting introduced to the sport, learning it for the first time.
Well, one of the biggest things is the ability to possess the ball. So in both games, that was one of the similarities for fans that aren't as used to watching is the United States was able to earn most of the possession of the ball. And some of that was by design by their opposition, and some of that was by good play from the United States. But what comes with that is then you've got 11 players behind the ball of your opposition. So it becomes incredibly tough to manipulate them, to get them to come out and to be able to score goals. I was really impressed yesterday with Balogun and Pepe up top. They were 2 against 3 most of the time, but the way we got that goal was to get Balogun on the ball in a 1 versus 1 situation. And that's where he could show his athleticism. When these teams try to sit in, it's because they don't want our athleticism and our pace and our technical execution to come out. And he was still able to find space to do that.
And I think a lot of people, at least in terms of a lot of the casual fans, maybe a lot of people who aren't as in tuned or ingrained with this, they see a lot of, the commercial and the marketing and everything else and how it's very Christian Pulisic centered. And they were still able to have a dominant performance without him against Australia. And we all kind of understand his, at least for, many of us that followed along, his injury history and how that can linger on into something even greater. But in terms of what he did in that first half against Paraguay, and also the three halves they had without him since. What does that go into with this third game against Turkey? Whether if it's maybe play him maybe as a substitute, maybe just keep him out this whole way and wait till the knockouts, and what that could mean for the U.S. outlook going forward and his ability to keep going in this tournament.
Getting a win yesterday and knowing that they were going to advance to the knockout stage, now knowing after the Paraguay win that they win the group, it takes all the pressure off having to play Christian Pulisic in this third game. So now you have a manager in Mauricio Pochettino who can decide where he's at with the medical staff of is he getting back to 100% and does he need some minutes just to stay in the flow of playing at a World Cup to where he feel he can contribute in the knockout rounds. The reality is if he's not 100%, they don't have to play him again, and that's okay. And I that is what was so critical about the win yesterday, because if they were in a position where they had to really have their best lineup out there in the third game, there would have been some unnecessary pressure potentially on Christian Pulisic, where he would want to play as well. His performance in game one, in the half he did play, was very high level. He was great off the dribble. He can unlock back lines in the way he dribble penetrates, the way he plays, and the distraction he causes. The reality is, though, we got to see the depth of our team, and the depth was tested against Australia. So for a team that wants to go far in the knockout rounds, this is something that's really nice to be able to get your players feeling like they're played in.
I kinda wanna shift gears a little bit, like, we're not necessarily going off course, we're just slightly going off the unbeaten path
It's
here.
okay.
But if you don't mind me asking, what was the first World Cup you saw, either men's or women's?
That's a great question. Live was 1994, and I was 10 years old, and I grew up a huge Diego Maradona fan. And the reason I said live is that I grew up watching videos, VHSs of the 1986 World Cup where Argentina won. It was held in Mexico. Diego Maradona was the top player, and I grew up watching that. My dad and mom were both big time athletes, and they really had me watching sports from a young age. So I was really inspired by the 1986 World Cup, but I was only two, and I started watching it 3, 4,
Yeah.
5 years later. Then 1994 came around, and I was actually able to attend in Dallas. I grew up in Arlington, Texas, and just have that inspiration of being there. And then you have the 99 Women's World Cup come around. So during my childhood, it was very formative to be able to watch those games. And I mean, 32 years later from the 94 World Cup, now I'm sitting here talking about it. So it's definitely been a big part of my life.
I mean, of course, and obviously, you have the platform that you have, having played with the national team, having now been on the Apple coverage of MLS. Obviously, that passion sparks something much greater into where you are now. So clearly, 94 and what was it 94 and 86, right? They clearly did
Yes.
a bunch on you.
Yes, definitely so. I feel like I just grew up watching the game, and that was rare for someone in the United States at that time that I'd be watching at that young of an age. So incredibly thankful and grateful that my parents were having me watch that because it's certainly impacted the rest of my life.
And you kinda going off of that, a lot of the blow up, I feel like, of soccer in the US and especially, and of course, you have a deep connection with the women's game, but I feel like a lot of that was accelerated, not just by '94, but also the '99ers, right? Especially
Correct.
with the results that they had, they won it all in a home venue, and we kind of have this very similar situation now where the US have a lot of high expectations. There's quarterfinals, maybe even semifinal hopes potentially by the draw and how the bracket plays out, so on and so forth. But from your perspective, especially with that 99ers group, having great results in a home venue, how much did that really maybe blow up the future of the sport to where it is now?
The 99ers changed the game on the women's side and in general in America. And that's the power of hosting a World Cup. Not only having success and winning, obviously that helps, but creating the passion throughout the tournament where all of a sudden you're picking up fans along the way. Yes, someone like me was already watching that. I was 15 in the 99 World Cup. And so I was right in the thick of I want to go play at the University of North Carolina because I was watching Mia Hamm, Christine Lilly, Carla Overbeck play in this World Cup. But I was also in the thick of wanting to be on the national team and having those dreams, having never been in a youth national team at that point. So you had me already. But the casual fan, every time they won, you got more casual fans in. And it improved the entire soccer ecosystem that they were able to garner that much fandom and then also get the results on top of it.
How did that accelerate even further with the three straight finals on the women's side between 11 and then the back to back in 15 and 19?
I think that the biggest part of watching world and global events in sport is the inspiration piece. And I can speak from thinking about being that young girl who saw someone who looked like me achieving that. And that to me is incredible. It's incredibly powerful to have that effect on young athletes, young men, young women, that they can see themselves represented at the highest level. And it does take a special young person to be able to do it without seeing that representation. But now we're seeing that and you're able to watch it. And so that has such a positive impact on the individual, but also on the entire soccer culture that we have here in the United States.
Because doing some of the digging, especially looking back on some of those rosters, um, because I think I was in high school during that 11 and 15 run, and I was in college when 19 happened, and kind of looking back, especially with how far and how similar a lot of the players were, at least uh in that what 8-year stretch. Like there was a lot of similarity and carryover. And I was actually looking back, and you actually played with a lot of the players on those rosters, on that 11,
Mhm.
15, 19 roster. When you kind of look back at that point of your career and seeing those players, the way they matured in 15 and 19, but they were very young when you were playing with them. Of course, the adages get tossed around. It's a full 11 effort. Everyone's a part of it. But based on maybe what the common person might not see, what did you maybe see as part of the formula that allowed the US women to blow up in that stage the way that they did, and how that might carry over to whomever the eventual champion is at the end of this tournament?
I don't think a whole lot changed, to be quite honest with you. I think the game grew and the game was ready for this. And the great thing about the United States women's national team is way back in the 80s to now, the commitment to wearing the crest and the commitment to competing and the ability to win at the highest level, that's never changed, but they were able to get 2 World Cups in 15 and 19. That was something that was eluding the US women's national team since 1999. But there were Olympic golds in between there, and golds plural. So still winning at the highest level, because on the women's side, that those are the top national teams, not U23 like the men's. And so I think what the consistency of what happens in the women's national team is, you want to compete and you want to compete at the highest level. And our internal competition really fueled the ability of the world to see that. But the soccer world, and I think the world in general, just continues to grow in their love of the game. And so the platform is now bigger than ever. And that's what we want. All of us players that have played in the past want the game to continue to evolve and the fans to continue to grow. And that's what we're seeing.
I was gonna say too, because like when you mentioned the growth and how much um and really how much they really had that sort of commitment, especially to the crest and just being a part of that, how much they really bought into that. And you look at some of the countries now who have just been perennially in there, Argentina, they made 2 of 3 finals, and they might be on pace for another. France made back-to-back finals, might be on pace for another. And when you see the kind of the consistency that the USA women's team had, and see it to some of these top men teams like your Argentinas, your Frances, and how they could potentially be on a collision course again, you can't help but wonder what the mirror is between them, because the consistency has been there on all aspects.
100%. It's hard to consistently win, and there's definitely formulas for doing it. But I think the formula can change across time. But it's incredibly impressive for those types of countries to be able to do that.
And then I kind of want to get some quick hitters before I let you go, Casey. I really appreciate you doing
Of
this. And
course,
these are a couple quick hitters,
yeah.
but you can always make them long hitters if you want. Um,
Okay.
Early first impression favorite to take the whole thing.
My first impression favorite, I have to be honest, before the World Cup was France. And they're still there for me because they are solid in each line, but they also have Mbappe. I mean, at the end of the day, you need a special player to win the World Cup, along with the fact that your entire team is consistent and performs at the right level. So I think they're still there, and that's what I've always said since the beginning. There's a lot of question marks around Spain, which I would have thought would go far in this tournament. So we'll see how they bounce back. And I already told you here, I've never not said this. Argentina has my heart, and well before Lionel Messi, but I love Leo Messi as well. So he keeps it going. He showed what he can do. I think there's been a lot of questions about where is he going to be and how is he going to perform and what is that role going to look like. He answered that pretty well, I'd say, in that first game versus Algeria. So that was exciting to watch. And Argentina looked solid overall. So I do think those are the three, and maybe add an England in there. I mean, Harry Kane was looking pretty good and they were going quick in the attack. So I think it's a little bit of a toss up.
You know, I made one bracket going into this, and I did have Spain winning it all, but now I'm so concerned that my bracket might be busted early. And actually, now that we're on that topic, perfect segue. What is the team that maybe had the highest hopes that might be a shocking early exit?
That's a really good question. I think you asked about the highest hopes, so obviously I'll get to that. I
Mhm.
do think though, and it's probably because it's the USA bracket, Turkey not advancing out of the group or not even having a chance to advance out of the group in the third game is shocking to me. They were the highest ranked team besides the United States in the group. So in a group that wasn't considered the hardest group of the World Cup. So I am surprised by it being over that early for them. On the other side, I do think Spain is going to figure it out. I think they are perennially slow starters. So I don't think they're going to be as early of an exit as people think they will be, but they've got a lot to prove after that first game.
Kind of rewinding back a little bit, have you done Leagues Cup or just on MLS so far?
A little bit of Leagues Cup last year, and then I'll be doing it this year.
Okay, I just had to clarify. I did want to get that clarified because I was just really curious about your thoughts top to bottom, especially with how the three host nations have looked, right? Mexico advanced, the US advanced, Canada, they're coming off of quite simply the most dominant performance of the entire tournament so far, despite losing Kone in the process of it. But having been in all three countries and having the affiliation with Leagues Cup and MLS across the three hosts, how have you really seen, and also everything we talked about prior, what that could just do not only for the respective host countries, but respectively for MLS and maybe even a little bit of Liga MX, but mostly in
Oh,
MLS.
right. Well, 45 players from Major League Soccer are represented at the World Cup, which is unbelievable. Not to mention the former players and current players that are represented across these three host countries. So that's great for our domestic league and just being able to show that we have players that are competing at the highest level currently. So that's a great thing for Major League Soccer. Now, looking at the performance of the host nations, we've already talked about the United States. A wonderful start. Mexico has had a challenging group and they've had the home advantage, as all our countries have. And that's a lot of pressure as well. So I've been impressed with Mexico to be able to step up and to be able to get the results that they've been able to get. Canada was a bit of a question mark coming in after that first game and first performance. And they really, I think, subsided a lot of those worries for their fans in game two. Now, it's Qatar, right? It's not the team that, you're overly worried about necessarily, but they proved that they could get a result in the first game. So Canada, I think now is going to use that as a springboard for these three countries and the growth of the game. All three advancing would be amazing. For soccer in Canada, for Mexico and the rich history that they have, and then the growth here in the United States.
And then, final thoughts before we wrap up, Casey. I really appreciate you doing this once again.
Of course.
But like we mentioned before, especially with the way that soccer is, it's very big on, the youth development, academy programs and everything else. But let's say, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but we're speaking purely hypothetical here. Let's say 2040 comes around, so that's about another 3 World Cup cycles. How much growth and how much higher of a ceiling perhaps could there be within not just the US team, but also maybe in terms of MLS getting respect and having more young prospects to dish out like we've seen with a lot of, a lot of the American players, how they were built within the MLS academy system, went overseas, and now they have their successful careers, so on and so forth. But how can you see that affecting the overall growth of MLS young players and just the overall quote unquote American soccer experience, however many years from now?
That's a lot to dive into. So I will try to do that here because there's a lot of directions I could go with that. What I will say is that US soccer wants soccer to be the American sport. And they have said that for the last almost 10 years, that they want to continue to grow this sport to be a top sport here in the United States as top choice. And if you look back 10 years ago, the growth has been immense. And we're not at that point yet, but we are growing at such a rate where there's more involvement. We're competing on the global stage and all of those pieces. So if you fast forward 14 years from now, who's to say it can't be the top sport here in the United States? And we had not as much of a history in the game of soccer as a lot of other sports in this country. So I think we are continuing to grow. More and more players are, being honed here that can play at the highest level, which is wonderful for the game. And for Major League Soccer, it is already proving with a lot of the players and how they're performing in this World Cup that it can be a top league and it can continue to grow. And so I think that is an awesome place to be. And I think the best place is where you know how far you've come, but you know you still have further to go. It keeps you humble, it keeps you hungry. And that's why I think it is going to continue to grow in the coming years.
From the NWSL and MLS on Apple, also coaching with TST, the former national teamer Kacey White.